All right, good evening. My name is Brett Huckleberry. I'm the Dallas CSI chapter president. Thank you for joining us for the June chapter meeting this evening. Hopefully all of us are adjusted working remotely these past few months due to the pandemic. I know that all of us are looking forward to the day that we can gather as a chapter again, but for now we're fortunate to have the technology that allows us to interact with each other. This time I'd like to welcome any guests that we have, new chapter members, CSI fellows, past presidents, region leaders, and chapter leaders. Upcoming events, awards dinner is to be determined. As all of you know, tonight would have been our awards dinner leading into the 2021 fiscal year. The fall kickoff chapter meeting is also to be determined. CDT exam dates, registration ends July 17th, 2020, and the exam window for the CDT exam has been extended till July 31st, 2020. What I call a change in the guard would typically happen tonight at our awards banquet, but it's been postponed due to the pandemic. Our incoming chapter president is Mr. Austin Moss, who's currently the president-elect. There's a picture of Mr. Moss. He is an architectural sales representative for GCP Applied Technologies. So please reach out to Austin if you have any questions about how to get involved in the Dallas chapter, and he'd appreciate inquiries and help with committees in his term as president from 2020 through 2021. And lastly, I'd just like to thank all the volunteers in our chapter that make this possible. Thank you for your time and your commitment. And I appreciate, as a chapter president, the time that you give and the volunteer work that you do for our chapter. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Keith Cox with SYNNEX Corporation. With almost 30 years of experience in the AEC industry, Keith has worked with hardware and software technology solutions across the spectrum from design, construction, and closeout. Working with firms from coast to coast, he has specialized in printing, image capture, and data transfer. For the past 10 years, he has been responsible for building and evangelizing the Jobsite TECH practice at SYNNEX. Jobsite TECH examines the use of technology across AEC and enables tech providers to provide solutions to both small and large users. At this time, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Keith Cox.
Well, thank you, Brett. Appreciate it. Just get the screen sharing done here and we're going to be good to go, right?
Yep.
Let's see if that works. There we go. That works right. Okay, good. Good. Hello, everybody. My name's Keith Cox. I work for SYNNEX Corporation, and I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to travel across the country and get to meet folks like y'all. From New York to LA. Although I'm not doing very much of that anymore. Well, we've been grounded since March 3rd, and that last trip into Manhattan. Glad I got out of there when I did on February 27th. Kind of crazy. In any case, what we do is we specialize in technology. SYNNEX as a corporation is an IT distributor, and I like to tell folks we have technology coming out of our ears. Through the graces of our marketing department, I am in the what we call the wide format group, which just happens to be the AEC, the architectural engineering and construction world. With all that technology, we figured we had to do something with it. And so about 6 or 8 years ago, we founded in what is today's terms, Jobsite TECH. The technology continuum is, spans the design and construction world. And when we talk about some of the technologies today, we're going to talk about, what's in the office, the trailer, the job site, the field, and then, a part that's sometimes overlooked, that is, actually running the facility that was designed and constructed in the end, the closeout process and beyond. That's one of those areas that, it seems to be an up and coming opportunity of growth for a lot of construction firms and a lot of folks in the AEC industry. And you're gonna have to excuse me. Sometime today I got a little tickle in the back of my throat, so it's tickling like crazy. So I'm gonna do the very best I can and keep it going. One of the things that we found in the in just the last few months, myself and another colleague of ours, we've created something called the Pulse of Jobsite Tech, and as a result, we've been in search of interviews with different folks in the industry, excuse me, and folks that affect the industry. And I'm not gonna put a bunch of them up here on the screen, but there's a couple of them that I think that are important to note. Number one, the last time we saw such a significant event take place that was essentially a game changer was the recession, and that was really the move from CAD to BIM back around 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. And you can see that the gentleman from Yale School of Architecture points out that now today there's a much larger array of tools, technology available, and so you almost have a choice. You don't have to pick all of it at one time. Very few people do, but to get involved in some of it now is probably more important than to let it all go by. Along those same lines, one of the reasons that it is important to not to let it go by is the gentleman from JLL Construction Research, the construction research lead for the Americas, points out that you're leaving a lot of efficiencies on the table. This is a very competitive time, very tight time in all of our industries, and anything we can do to squeeze an extra dollar out or squeeze an extra minute even is very critical, because I don't think anybody was expecting what was going to happen. SYNNEX as a corporation, digital transformation is in our 5 to 8 year plan, from an IT perspective. But I just learned how to spell digital transformation correctly last fall. Now I've got to live it. And so it's kind of a goofy thing, but there we are, and COVID-19 comes right down the pike and changes everything and accelerates the opportunity. Speaking of that opportunity, some other folks, I just have to point this out because it's amazing what changes can take place. You look at what Microsoft, Autodesk, and how Zoom has been affected. Just the increases in their own particular businesses. And if anybody follows the stock market, it wasn't that long ago, literally about 30 days ago, Zoom was at about $100 a share, and now it's over 200. So I mean, these are technologies that have prospered during COVID. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that we've grabbed onto to use to get by and what we're working with. There are a number of promising technologies out there in the marketplace. God knows, like I said, we have technology coming out of our ears, and every day something changes. This is something that happened. This change happens very rapidly. And so, when I was first asked to speak with you tonight, we picked a number of different topics and winnowed it down a little bit. So we're down to about 5 topics that we're going to talk about tonight. But I do want to mention that one of the things that, one of the hottest things that seems to be happening, and it is number 1 on this slide, is prefab and modular construction. I attended Autodesk University last fall, and there's a whole process in how to move away from the site and move as much back to a factory almost, if you will, if you can. And it kind of just makes you think that there's some really large changes in the future. Now they're probably that future may be 4 or 5 years away. But the move to prefab is probably one of the hottest things going on right at the moment, and there's a lot of different particulars that are related to that. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about these 5 different areas. So we're going to talk about reality capture, something that is taking place on almost every from design through the job site and even in the operations of the buildings. And when we talk about reality capture, we're specifically going to talk about 3D scanning and photogrammetry, and those manifest themselves in different ways. And secondly, we're going to talk about virtual and augmented, perhaps mixed reality. And it's a mixed bag of sorts, and it's been an interesting market segment in technology in terms of how it's shaken itself out or continues to shake itself out, which might be a better way of describing it. The third thing we're going to discuss is digital twins. And there's another one of those terms that I'm not sure I could have spelled it last fall, but now I have to use it in a sentence. And what digital twins brings is a whole different aspect to what we're looking for. In fact, one of the things we get to do as part of the fun part of my job is a little bit of research occasionally, talking about how different things are changing. And there's a study out of Deloitte that indicates that one of the number one thing that owners are looking for in their jobs are the ability to do predictive analytics, and digital twins is the leader in that world. The fourth item is job boxes. Now, job boxes have been around for a long time, and digital job boxes have been around almost as long. And they're making a comeback, and COVID is helping them make that comeback. Just a little bit of water of the old throat down. The fifth thing is job site safety, and even though it's the fifth thing, it should always be the number one thing, because job site safety is always number one. And some things because of COVID, because of some of the technology, proximity distancing has affected it, and predictive analytics is part of that as well. So we're gonna take a little bit of a dive into that, talk about one of the programs that are out there, and leave it up to you to figure out what might fit in your world. But first, we're going to go and talk about reality capture. So in the beginning, so to speak, there was basically the hand tape. Well, there's still the hand tape today, right? If we're honest with each other, and we go out and we measure and we get points, and the whole concept is to try to get accuracy and get the measurements so we can begin and design a program or design a building, or a concept, so that we can all get started. But you need to know where things are at in order to get started. Well, the hand tape is the easiest and not necessarily the most efficient, but it works. Total stations came along and brought some efficiency to the table. But you still could only, you were still limited by how many real measurements you could get per day. GPS helps, that's something. The accuracy is something of a question about that. But then later on, laser scanning came along, and we changed it from hundreds of points a day to millions of points per second. And that made a big difference. Now, there's a battle out there that says, laser scanning is the way to do it. It's the silver bullet. It's the be all end all. But in the heart of hearts of all those folks that run laser scanners, they'll tell you that in the end, wherever that end might be, the photogrammetry may be the ultimate answer for a number of different reasons. And let's talk about some of the applications, and we'll explore that. So as I mentioned, we're always out after the the measurements, and so as-builts become the number one topic that we want to get to. So especially if you're doing any kind of renovation work whatsoever, it's a fact that 80% of the buildings that exist out there today were not designed in CAD, and so chances are your hand-drawn drawings are not very accurate. Those as-builts that they have locked away in the basement or the attic or in a closet somewhere, may not really fit. And so how do you get good information? Well, you have to go out and you take the hand tape, you take the GPS, you take the total station, or you take a laser scanner, or you take a camera and measure off of known points from there, and that gets you started. But the as-builts are a primary and a very logical application for laser scanners, especially because as laser scanners have gone in the last 10 or 12 years from more art than science, today, they're a very interesting tool to have in your toolbox. One of the scanners that we work with on a regular basis today will give you a fairly large range at 3mm accuracy and do a scan in 26 seconds. You can't get much faster than that, but they keep trying. On the other hand, taking a photo is worth 1,000 words, as they say. The other side of one of the other applications is progress scanning and verification. A lot of the VDC guys that I know that do a lot of the progress scanning or progress notation would be those guys that come into after a milestone or walk into a room that just got completed and they hit their Rico theta and they're on their way in less than 15 seconds. And as long as they can get a 360 image out of that, they're on their way, and they have all the documentation that they need, but they're collecting data. The verification part, though, is a more interesting part. And the verification part comes from the fact that some jobs out there are BIM related. Now, not everything is a BIM job out there. And while a lot of jobs are done in Revit, there's still some questions in coordination meetings about whether or not what was created, what was actually constructed is fit the model, so to speak. So a verification application is important in order to reduce change orders, or at least an attempt to reduce change orders. Another application out there that, and I call it 3D documentation, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's more construction documentation, and that is, sometimes we want to geotag different aspects of, of a building or a design in the construction phase, so that we know what we're doing afterwards. There's an electrical line that runs between a couple HVAC ducts, for example, or there's a water line that's running across that parking lot. And instead of it's much more preferable to once again measure off a known object to find where that water line is to correct the problem than it is to play whack-a-mole. So there's a couple different applications that you can use either in laser scanning or photogrammetry there. Now, I might mention that photogrammetry is not limited to a handheld camera by any stretch. I mean, in one of the photos here, you see a drone, and that gives you a good overall view of what's going on a site. And you can do that on a regular basis. And as well as there's a number of other programs out there that track daily, what's going on. Multi-Vista, for example, or EarthCam, or a couple of those opportunities. One of the next applications might be clash detection. Quite frankly, just to figure out if what was built is going to cause a problem with the model, or basically if you have a laser scan of an image or of a area, you can overlay the model on top of that and make sure that you're close or right on. And in a lot of cases, you're not exactly right on, and some things need to be changed. Excuse me. Then, of course, there's scan to BIM, scan to plan. Just another way to improve efficiencies, and you can bring a laser scan into Revit or AutoCAD, and lay that over and basically play the old method of connect the dots, or using some of the tools, automate that a little bit better and make it more efficient. One of the things you do know when you bring in a laser scanned image is that you're going to get chances are you're going to get millimeter type accuracy, and so that should give you some confidence in your design. AutoCAD and Revit based 3D deliverables are another application, and they fit right in the scan to BIM, scan to plan. But sometimes it's what you're concerned about, with what the owner or the stakeholder wants on the backside, in terms of I've taken this photograph or I've taken this scan, and what I want out of it is a 2D plan. How do I go about doing that? And the last thing that I want to mention here, I said that prefab is hot. but nothing is hotter than floor flatness, floor leveling for excitement for folks that are doing concrete. And I say that a little tongue in cheek, but I'm also very serious about it because, in our experience with it, we've learned that, some people are very fortunate and everything's turned out well, but you're more than likely to hear all the horror stories of where things did not turn out well. And so the most recent one, and it's a nasty story, is the Turner VP that we talked to back in November at a technology event, who explained to us that they're now putting laser scanners on live pours because you can scan in 26 seconds. And here in Texas, if you tried to pour today, we're pouring about 3 o'clock in the morning, right? By 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, it's too late to do anything else about it. But it cost Turner in this particular case $350,000 to tear it all out and re-pour. I don't know exactly what it is. He was a little embarrassed about it, as you can imagine. But that is an extreme, to say the least. It's not unusual though to hear about folks that are spending anywhere between $25,000 and $75,000 to fix problems that were created. And then on the other hand, we've also learned that some firms pick up a laser scanner because, quite frankly, and I have trouble understanding this. We were in Philadelphia. A firm up there was building a hotel. He did not trust his concrete sub, and he wanted to put a laser scanner there on that hotel to scan every floor as it was poured. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you just hire somebody that you trust? But that's another story. But floor flatness, floor leveling pays for itself very quickly. It also is real effective in putting out a report that shows hot spots, high, low, however you want, or is your slant. You're going to be able to run off moisture, like in a parking garage, for example. Is everything going the way that it needs to be? And you're not going to hold water up there. So those are some of the applications. One of the neat things about the whole concept of behind reality capture, though, is that there's a pretty quantifiable return on investment. The RS Means Construction Cost Index has done a study, and basically, I don't think it comes as a big surprise. The change orders, comprise about 15 to 18% of most jobs. But if you use any kind of reality capture or laser scanning during construction, you can reduce that number by 3 to 5%. And that can be significant. Basically, it really boils down to this: at each dollar spent in real-time capture can yield a $3 savings, and that's a big deal. We mentioned some of the areas already that you can benefit from reality capture. As-built's obviously BIM modeling, but it's used in oil and gas, wastewater treatment plants, power and process plants. We talked about the scanning before a pour to make sure that we know where, or scanning or photographing before a pour to make sure that we know where things are located. Architectural documentation is another important thing. And then one of the other items that becomes important as well is the ability to not just walk through with that 360 camera and geotag perhaps services, but to provide a record of everything. And there are services out there. Everybody's familiar with Matterport. The other service available out there is called Cupix. Matterport requires a 3D camera. Cupix can work with a 360 camera, and they both process, store images in the cloud, and give you the capability to look at different things, your properties, through a different lens, and be able to walk through and not look at it so much as a VR, AR, or a mixed reality, but actually what it is. You'll see Matterport used quite a bit, by the way, on real estate. That's very popular in that world. In any case, so that's reality capture, and we're going to move on. Virtual reality and augmented reality. My, what a world it is. And as far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, when we put this together, we didn't duplicate any of these goggles. So that should tell you that there's a lot going on out there, and not anybody has one particular solution that solves all the problems, although it does help a great deal in certain applications. You know, VR has really, captured folks' imaginations. You know, the way that you can, the way you can, design something and then go to an owner and say, hey, this is what your luxury box looks like from the 50-yard line, at the new stadium, so to speak, or, the one right behind home plate, that type of thing. AR in much the same way, Microsoft has been a pioneer in augmented reality and, using HoloLens, and now we're at HoloLens 2, and a lot of folks are writing applications for it. And of course, the mixed reality part where you're combining, both a virtual and a augmented world together, to create even more images is, it's mind-boggling to a certain extent, because in some cases, depending on what they're doing, you don't know what's real or what's designed. But I do want to tell you about an opportunity that we had that we worked with, and this is a virtual reality application. This is the Emory University Hospital renovation in Atlanta. We were part of this as working with Samsung and McCarthy. And as many of you may know or don't know, I'm not sure, that when you're building a hospital, you have to build out mock-ups, and the doctors, nurses, and administrators all walk through, and it's a spatial test. It's to make sure that you can reach equipment, that type of thing, and that everything is in its place. And so the image on the left is the actual mock-up that was done for Emory University Hospital. This is actually built inside a construction trailer. By the way, it took 12 weeks to do that. The image on the right is taken from the Revit files and converted to a Unity-based, we'll talk about Unity in a minute, Unity-based image that ran on a Samsung VR. Samsung VR goggles, basically off a phone. And so, what they learned is the 12 weeks to build the physical mock-up versus 2 weeks to build the virtual mock-up. Now, I was on the phone on this conference call listening in when the project engineer from McCarthy explained what the costs were on both of these, and I about fell over because, there were 5 different mock-ups that had to be built for this particular project. And, this physical mock-up was $80,000. The virtual mock-up was $10,000. And, he explained that they could save that kind of time over the whole project, and save that kind of money over that project as well. And I had to kind of do the little thing with my ear to make sure I was hearing correctly, because I couldn't believe that you could have that kind of savings. Well, the truth of the matter is that, well, you can, but really what the virtual reality does in a situation like this, it helps you build a really pointed and accurate mock-up. So if you use virtual reality first to get some of the things out that uncover some of the problems that you might have, it lets you build something that really approximates what the actual room is going to be. So that ultimately happened in the end, although they ended up saving some money doing so. But it was pretty compelling to see that happened. Now, when we talk about that, the Unity side of things, you can go even a little bit further. So on the left is what we did for Emory University, and what we did on the right was a Unity artist from Unity, their concept of what we could do with that image. And you can see the difference is almost, one's almost photorealistic, which is pretty incredible. A couple of the companies, and there's many companies out there that offer these things. This particular one was Vim AEC that did this one. Revisto's out there. there's a number of companies in the virtual reality world out there. There's really too many to mention. But over in the detail, in the dress up, the mock up, however you want to put it, the Unity world, there's basically two engines, Unity and Unreal. To give you an idea, the stadium, just not far from most of y'all, I'm guessing, over in Arlington, Jerry's Jones's place was done in Unreal. It was very expensive to do it, but it turned out to be very, very realistic in the construction, and made a big impact when that was done a number of years back. So just a couple of the things that you can do in the virtual world. I have to do this. Samsung actually put this together, and the McCarthy lady, who was the virtual design, the VDC engineer on there, shows you a little bit about what happened with all this. One of the things we'll talk about in a minute on this is what a virtual or augmented reality can do for you. And one of those things is that we'll do clash detection. And what we learned on the Emory University project, had not any clue about this. In the design, for some crazy reason, don't know why, don't know if it's anybody's fault, it just kind of happened. The fire extinguishers were placed up near the ceiling. And when the nurses went through virtually, they noticed that, asked the question, and before anything was ever built, everything was modified to bring those back down to a regular level. So, as I mentioned, there are benefits to virtual reality and augmented reality, and obviously the immersive experience. When you put those goggles on, I mean, you're in the project. The fact that it can look photorealistic, or it can look just like a BIM model, depending on the program you use. The free roam and walkthroughs make it easier. Typically, if anybody's ever used Oculus, you'll have something in your hand that helps you move through that, and you're tethered on that one, as opposed to like Samsung, where you're using a phone and you're really free to walk around. And some people have a lot of fun with folks when they have goggles on and they can't see what they're doing to them. It's got to be easy to use, otherwise people won't do it. And that ease of use extends all the way through the fact that some people are a little concerned about it when you put those goggles on, that they get a little seasick. And that can happen, but it does improve collaboration. You get the spatial elements in there. You get the colors, you get the feel. All you're missing really is the smell. So the smell, and if you run the right kind of noises, now you're hitting as many senses as you can. Some of the programs can retain all the BIM data, so that if you want to touch something and see what the specifications are on it, you would be capable of doing that. And one of the great things for that, for the improved collaboration and ease of use, is that you don't have to be a Revit jock to get involved in that. And lastly, because a lot of the stuff goes into the cloud and is on supercharged computers with lots of file space, there are no file size limits typically. I say that, and sure enough, somebody's going to come up with terabytes worth of data. But that is the case. So VR, AR, it's a different world out there. And one of the things that I've learned, and I meant to say this in the reality capture, is that with laser scanners and photogrammetry, it's the right tool for the right job. And one of the things I discovered in the VR AR world is that for example, I always thought, well, an architect might invest in this particular product, let's say the Vim AEC product, and do all their work in there. And what I've learned is that that's not the case. That firms go out and it's the right tool for the right job. Some of these applications do some things better than others. Some may allow a better free roam walkthrough. Some of them may allow better customization and dressing up of the images for rendering purposes. So it's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing, and I don't believe that in the VR AR world you're going to see a one-size-fits-all anytime soon. There's too many options out there yet, and it's probably a world that's heading for some sort of consolidation in the future, but not right at the moment. So let's talk about digital twin, right? This is where I like to say where BIM meets the Internet of Things, so to speak. And really, it's an interesting concept. As we progress in technology-wise, buildings become more than structures; they become machines almost. Sat in a meeting about a year or so ago up in St. Louis, and everybody was worried about whether the building was going to automatically turn down the temperature and adjust the lighting when we fired up the computer to display on the screen, just so it would meet everybody's expectations and comfort levels. But a digital twin, a virtual model, collecting real world information. There's a number of ways they do that. There's sensors that are built into the HVAC system, or built into the lighting system that are sensitive to what the room is purposed for at the time. You can have a tablet on the outside of the room that not only reserves the room for you, but asks how many people that you are, how long you'll be in there, that type of thing, and make all the climate adjustments for you. There is depending on who you work with, there's an AI component to this where the twin continuously can learn, actually pulling in the data from the multiple sources that you might have, and helps you control the operation of that building or project. And and like I said, the more control, the more data that you're able to analyze, the more it becomes like a machine. And that's where IoT really steps in. So what are some of the characteristics that we found? Look, the one thing is, even as I go through this whole situation, it's one big what if, right? What if we made it hotter? What if the winters were longer? What if there was the drought? Those kind of things, and you can play those on the virtual side, and that helps you run the physical side. But it certainly aids in decision making because you're doing simulations, right? And it helps all the project stakeholders as a result. Especially in making changes, making decisions about changes. Analysis and prediction. You're going to analyze a number of different what may seem to be unrelated data sets. Everything's going to come together, and that may create new opportunities for you, or it may help you to figure out and say, what, if we do this, this, and this, we can operate this whole building more efficiently, or we can turn it on and it can operate more efficiently on its own as it learns more. But that goes right on to improving the day-to-day operations, the tracking of how things are moving, what's working, what broke down, that type of thing. And of course, that is your user's guide, right? So that provides you a better understanding of the maintenance tracking, the quality control experience that you might have for those that live and work in that building. Naturally, there's a budget component to this as well, because when you have all this different data and what the maintenance schedules are, and what the for example, the environmental factors are, the energy factors are, it helps you in determining the warranties on your equipment, the depreciation schedule, your operating expenses versus your capital expenses you might have to use in order to correct things that may have been flaws originally, but aren't necessarily hard fixes. And lastly, it's a risk mitigation component as well, where you can predict based on all this data coming in. You know, what, given certain conditions, what am I going to need to do or not need to do to either make the whole experience better or to avoid nasty surprises. So just a little more on this, because the IoT component on this is, I think, understated. You know, and it's certainly it is an integral part of digital twins. So you think about this for a second. IoT in a commercial building, you know, you're working for mobility and customization. You know, I mentioned the tablets on the outside of the room that allowed you to, you know, provide information about the room. You know, specifically in this case, just like I mentioned, the occupant comfort and environmental control. You know, how many people are going to be in the room? Is it hot outside? Do I need to turn the air conditioning on? Is it going to be too hot in that room? Or the light's going to be too bright? And then, of course, energy consumption monitoring. You know, at some point in time, you know, you may want to factor in the fact that, you know, we're here in Texas, and we all know what summers are like, right? And we know that, you know, certain utilities will give you a break at certain times of the day, and maybe you factor those in as well. And that certainly then would have an effect on the building functionality and the sensors. And, you know, they're shutting some sensors off or shutting some sensors down or off, or opening some others up. You know, you know, opening airways is what I was getting at, using the sensors to determine that. And then, of course, you know, providing in the end the results, because that's what we're all, you know, that's what the owners of the building really wants. You know, what's the detailed and actionable reporting? You know, maybe there is no actions required, but maybe there is, depending on what's going on. The Internet of Things. So, you know, the Gartner Group figured out in 2016 there's 518 million connected things. You know, well, guess what? There's more. You know, as people start to, you know, work on smart cities, you know, Gartner's determined now, you know, there's 1.6 billion connected things, you know, that are out there, and that will continue to grow. And one of the reasons for that growth is 5G. About a year or so ago, I had the opportunity to work with the Gensler folks and talk about how they design. And, you know, they're designing for, you know, for this world of digital twins where, you know, where all this data is coming in and the building becomes a machine. But what's more important, the engine behind that design isn't what you think it is. It is all your smartphones, cameras, all the different appliances out there that become part of a neural network where, you know, you may not know it, but your phone's being contacted so it can process some sort of, you know, help process some sort of algorithm that contributes to exactly, you know, how the building's being run, and, you know, based on the design. And, you know, once again, it's all a matter of different data, you know, being brought together and and being analyzed so that it can give you, you know, different outcomes. That what if that I talked about to begin with. Here's an example. It's not an extreme example. We're back to concrete again. You'd think I was in the concrete business, wouldn't you? But here's an embedded concrete sensor. Remember, we're in Texas and we're doing pours. So we put that sensor into the concrete as we pour it, and we know exactly what the moisture level is a couple hours later. Now, anybody in Texas knows that it's probably cured by 6 a.m. if you started pouring at 3. But, you know, that sensor will confirm that for you. And not only that, Skanska's created their own application that the project manager or the engineer or whoever is running that pour on that day can look at his phone and have a pretty good idea of where he's at in his concrete pour. So very simple as that. Just as simple as it gets, just to make sure that particular application was done correctly. But, you know, the real key to that is data. You know, we've got all these devices out there, and more devices coming as 5G, you know, really becomes implemented around the country. And we're going to collect data, and we're going to collect more data, and we're going to have to do something with that data, right? You're going to have disparate groups of data coming in, and maybe somebody's going to sit down and try to figure out, how to pull it together, or maybe somebody's going to just, create an algorithm that makes those decisions and, transforms that data in a way that makes some sense to us, so that, we can use that data, or it can run on its own, to deliver information back, to allow us to make decisions, or allow the machine to make decisions on how to operate the building. And whether or not we analyze and act on it, it's the intelligence that comes out of all of that is what we're really looking for. And as I mentioned in the very beginning, when I mentioned digital twins at the start, that Deloitte study, the number one thing that owners are looking for is that predictive analytics, that intelligence, that's going to give them, basically the information they need to run their building. So, from moving from digital twins to job boxes and BIM in the field, it's a kind of a different type of thing, but it's all part of the digital transformation. BIM has had an impact in a number of different ways, and one of the ways it's impacted in part of the world that I live in, it's reduced the amount of printing that's used typically on sites. And some sites are that reduction in printing has been drastic, and in other parts fairly noticeable. But overall, the use of paper prints, construction documents, on job sites in a BIM world, or a 3D modeling world, is in a shallow decline, and that's taken place. When we were doing our COVID interviews, we talked to a VDC vice president from Swinnerton, and he basically said the papers disappeared on all their sites. And you and I both know, or we all know, that's not really the case. Paper's never going to disappear. It's just the amount that we use is probably going to decrease based on our day-to-day usage as we digitally transform. But one of the methods that helps you do that are these job boxes. And the whole reason, here comes the nasty video. Basically, it's, Connect's deal is how long it takes you to order a print and get it to the field where you need it. And I'm not going to play this thing because it's annoying. If the clock's going, you see it, it keeps going and going and going. And the real purpose of all this is to try to get data to where the job is taking place as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Excuse me. You can see that, the Pepper folks use it. And basically, Pepper says they use a NAC data vault to provide access to project information where the work was happening. And that's really, that's a key part of that, and very significant. Some of you may have seen these, some of you may have used these, some of you think, well, why use them at all? They are being used on a number of projects around the country, multiple units. They come in different sizes. Most of the time there's a large format display inside there, or a printer. And as I note on the bottom, they are perfect right now for social distancing. Why, you ask? One of the things we learned in our interviews for the Pulse of Jobsite Tech was that in the world of COVID, in this pandemic, they are limiting the amount of folks that can come into the construction trailer. That's one limiting factor right there. Plus, in so many of these projects anymore, the construction trailer is a good walk or a good haul or hike away from where the work's actually being done. The Emory University Hospital example we used before, it was almost a mile. The trailer was almost a mile from where the work was being done. Recently, in one of the projects down here, I'm actually located in Sugar Land, Texas. There was a project here. We were shipping them out, and I noticed it was in Sugar Land, so I took the opportunity to go visit with the project engineer. And at the time, the Connect box was about 40 yards from the trailer. And I had to ask him, I said, look, his name was Skip. Skip, you're 40 yards from the trailer. What value are you getting out of that box? I really wanted to know. And he says, I don't know what it is, but there must be something in the air that when I bring our folks and they walk across those 40 yards, once they leave the trailer, information goes in one ear and right back out the other. And I'm like, what are with these people? Why can't they retain anything? But I found, he said, that if we hold safety meetings, meetings to update, to talk about what work needs to be done for the day, right at the box, and we review things on the screen, it's much more effective. And that's what you're going to find when we look at what the reasons for the job boxes are. It brings the information closer to the work area, right? You're saving time. You can view the forms, RFIs. You can send them. You can receive them. Typically, they're on the network when you do that. There's no more walking, whether it's 40 feet, 40 yards, or a mile to the trailer. It becomes an extension of the trailer. And if you're working in smaller groups, it is a better thing for the social distancing part of it. So there's a number of different ways to do that. Jason Jones, the VDC director at O'Neill, who's now the VDC vice president, I think, says that he'll guarantee you 2 additional hours of time for each day, time savings each day, for every floor you go up in a vertical construction environment by the use of the boxes. Some folks use these boxes in their literature and in their competitive analysis. They're going to an owner and they're telling them about the technology that they use. I pulled this right off of their website, so you can see that they're making it clear to anybody that looks at considering hiring them for work that their crews are trained to use this unit and provide everyone on site, including the subcontractors, by the way, with access to this to increase efficiency and to make sure that everybody has access to all the information and data. That's a real important thing. So, faster access to the data, there's no question about that. Increased confidence in the build. That might be a marketing thing, but you do have access to see the model, in a much larger screen instead of something that you're holding in your hand. But if you are holding something in your hand, you're also able to screen mirror that back to that larger screen right out there in the field where things are being done. So that's that is an advantage. They are durable and they are secure and they are mobile, so you can move them around pretty easily. Those bigger ones, they actually weigh 600 pounds, and I can push one of those around myself. The smaller ones, easy to do. In fact, they weigh just under 300 pounds, the smaller ones, and I'm able to put that with a little bit of help of leverage from the tailgate, put that in my truck and get it out by myself. So I mean that's pretty good. Also, I can tell you how durable they are. One of those small ones was on the Mercedes-Benz Stadium job in Atlanta, the Falcon Stadium. And wind came up before everything was closed off and blew it down 2 levels. And sure enough, it landed. They're made of steel, so it didn't break the box at all. And amazingly enough, all the computer and the display inside all worked, and they were still able to just basically crane it back up to the right level again and go back to work and use it. So, and the one thing that Canac always wants to tell you is they are secure, and they make a big effort at talking about how proud they are of their locking systems. Just try to open one time, even after you've unlocked. So that much for job boxes. Let's talk about the world of safety. The construction place can be construction job site can be a busy place. Lots of stuff going on, lots of people, lots of materials in the way of things, and lots of opportunities for bad things to happen. And so what we try to do is follow the whole concept of safety first. That that certainly that nobody, there's no need for anybody to have an accident. If you all follow the rules, everybody should be just fine. So if you're wearing your glasses and your hard hat and all that, we should be okay. But things do happen. So there are systems out there that monitor or are available to monitor, and there's a number of different ones, and we're seeing more, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, in some of the practices that they're implementing. But obviously, if you're able to have look at your job site with some remote visibility to provide oversight and accountability to the guys working on there, the subcontractors, that's a big deal, because whether you're looking at them through a job site camera or a multi-vista, or you're looking through some sort of earth cam, or somebody's just walking around taking pictures, that's one method of kind of policing that effort. And if you're able then to automatically detect safety hazards ahead of time, that gives you the ability to take steps and reduce the incidence of accidents and any kind of hazards that may actually occur. So once again, back to the automation side of this, if it's automated, and you have, you're able to look at this and you're working at keeping things under control, you're most likely going to affect the quality of what's done. And as a result, it's a little bit of a stretch, but, reduce the amount of, or the cost of construction defects. And lastly, obviously, once again, like everything else, it's got to be easy to use. Otherwise, it doesn't do any good for anybody. And so, what we've seen, once again, I'm going to rely back on the work we've done the last couple months in the pulse of Jobsite Tech, is the new things that we discovered from COVID-19. And some of these things have been around for some time now, but just as an example, what I have on the screen here, Smart Vid.io basically uses artificial intelligence and photogrammetry to basically analyze whether or not folks have their hard hat, their helmet, their vest on. But in the COVID world, now they've amended the algorithm to look for your mask, whether or not you're socially distancing or whether proximity distancing, whichever you want to call it, that type of thing. You see PCL. PCL's introduced two different models. They basically modular buildings that they put on the website, on the work site for mobile COVID testing centers. So sub comes on the site, you can go right to the testing center, get tested, and whether or not he's going to make it onto the entire job site or not is up to him. Triax is another option out there. Now, Triax has been around for a long time. In the same kind of vein as SmartVid, and that it uses a GPS sensor that you put on your belt, put on your helmet, something along those lines that helps and basically tracks you around the job site to know when you're in trouble or not in trouble. But in the world of COVID, now it's used for proximity analysis and contact tracing. So these are some of the things that have come up. I noticed we're coming up on the hour. I'm on the final stretch. So what I wanted to do was take a deeper dive and talk just a little bit about what Smart Vid.io does as an example. And here once again, we're going to use predictive analytics. We're going to use AI and machine learning. And the machine that learns in this case, if you look under safety monitoring, you'll see that automatically detect unsafe conditions and behaviors with Vinny. Vinny's their AI machine that basically analyzes all the photographs. So So what they're going to do is they're going to use whatever camera technology is available on the job site, or they'll put a camera technology out there, and you know, based on consultations with the owner or the project engineer, you know, they'll take samplings of photographs at, you know, a number of different times during the day, so that they can you know, basically implement you know, get right down to it, and make their observations about what's going on, so that they can, you know, bring that back to Vinny and do an analysis. So once again, like everything else we're talking about, we're collecting data. So we have people on the job site, we have photographs from the job site, and now we're going to take all those photographs and video, and we're going to analyze that. Vinny's going to do his work, and basically what's going to happen is you're going to get a report. There were so many instances on a daily basis. There were so many instances on a weekly basis. Based on your daily and weekly incidents, you know, we're going to predict that you're going to probably have a safety violation of significance, you know, sometime in the next 10 days, if not corrected. So it gives you a blueprint, if you will, to go ahead and work on the safety side of it. You know, whereas like Triax, for example, tracks you around the job site and make sure that you're not getting into areas that that could perhaps, you know, be a situation that endangers your safety. So in this case, Smart Vid.io has a partnership with Suffolk, and you can see that you know, Suffolk makes a statement that says it helps them control the hazards and improve the safety performance, and you know, basically allows them to pay attention to places where the predictions say that the risk is elevated. So safety is first on the job site. So all these are very important. So, you know, I believe we've made it through all the 5 different areas of technology that we started out to talk about. There's just a ton of technology out there. Like I like to say, got technology coming out your ears, and you can use as much or as little of it as you want. But I can tell you one thing for certain. Technology usage is accelerating, more so every day. It's incredible. As I was preparing just this week to do this presentation to you, you know, out last night pops a McKinsey study that's recommending short-term and long-term technology adoptions for the AEC world, based on not just COVID, but the economic conditions that are currently taking place, the lack of available workforce out there, and, you know, indicating, of course, a more reliance on technology. So, you know, for me, I got to hang on tight. This train's moving fast, but you have to ask yourself, you know, where's your firm at today? And in terms of technology, you know, what's your plan for tomorrow? Because, you know, it's all going to change very rapidly. With that, I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we're open for questions, I guess, huh?
Hi, Keith. Yeah, this is Daniel. I didn't see any Q&A come in, but I also suspect that maybe people didn't catch it at the bottom, or they were overwhelmed. From my point of view, very good presentation, very thorough. And at the same time, I think you probably just scratched the surface.
As I told Brett today, that you're not going to get the 50,000 foot view, you're going to get the 40,000 foot view. You could spend days getting down to the 25,000 foot view.
Yeah, great presentation. We really appreciate Keith coming on our chapter and presenting this evening.
Well, it's my pleasure. You know, anytime I can do anything to help y'all, just contact Randy. He knows how to get a hold of me.
Okay. Let's see. Do we have a question come in, Daniel?
Just Yeah, same thing. Yeah, a couple excellent presentation. Great full-blown presentation. We'll give everyone a second to type. Otherwise, if we're done. Brett, one of the things that the Zoom meeting does include, when we close it out, it'll have, and I see in the chat box someone was asking about certificates of completion, and the attendees will be redirected to the CSI Next website, and there's a short 3-question form. Two of the questions are, did you like the presentation? Was Keith good at presenting? And do you need a certificate? So when we close that out, if that doesn't happen, I believe all the attendees will be emailed tomorrow with that link also.
Okay, great. Great. All right. Well, that will conclude the meeting, and thank you for joining the Dallas CSI chapter this evening. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
All righty,
Thanks,
guys.
Brett. Thanks, Keith.
Appreciate it. My pleasure.